In 1850, the best-lit homes in America glowed on boiled whale fat. 40 years later, the whales were spared by accident. Every energy source humans have ever used was dethroned the same way, and the same quiet rule is picking the next winner right now. For most of human history, there was exactly one power plant available, and you are looking out of it: the human body. Everything got built, carried, planted, and ground by muscle. A person working hard produces roughly enough power to run one old light bulb. Then, about 1 million years ago, somebody kept a burning branch alive. Fire was the first energy source we controlled instead of chased. Fire cooked food, which meant more calories from the same hunt. Some scientists argue cooking is why human brains grew so large. For hundreds of thousands of years, the entire energy system was 2 items long: muscle for work and wood for heat. Around 6,000 years ago, we found a loophole: borrow someone else's muscle. An ox delivers the working power of several humans. Animals ploughed fields, hauled stone, and turned mills. Civilization scaled up on rented muscle, paid for in grain and grass. But muscle has a brutal accounting problem. Every worker, human or animal, eats. Past a point, feeding your power supply consumes your farmland. And wood has its own hidden ceiling, one that would take humanity nearly 1 million years to actually hit. So the first great search began. Power that didn't eat, didn't sleep, and didn't burn down the forest. We found it moving. Over 3,000 years ago, Egyptian riverboats raised sails and let the wind do the rowing. Wind became our first transport fuel. Then, over 2,000 years ago, came the real revolution: the water wheel, a machine that turned nature's motion into work, no feeding required. A good water wheel replaced dozens of labourers, grinding grain around the clock. Medieval Europe ran thousands of them, on nearly every river. England's Domesday Book, a tax survey from 1086, counted more than 5,000 watermills in England alone. Windmills came centuries later, out of Persia. They pumped water, sawed lumber, and drained the Netherlands into existence. Free fuel, blowing everywhere. But water and wind shared one fatal flaw: you couldn't choose where or when the power showed up. A mill needs a river, a windmill needs weather. Your factory had to move to the power, because the power wouldn't move to you. And on a calm day, or a frozen river, everything simply stopped. Reliability wasn't a feature you could buy at any price. Windmills would eventually vanish from the landscape almost entirely. Remember that, because in this story, no energy source ever really dies. What the world wanted was power you could put in a sack and carry anywhere. It turned out to be a black rock. England hit wood's ceiling first. By the 1600s, forests near cities were stripped, and firewood prices were climbing beyond ordinary reach. The replacement was ugly, smoky, and despised: coal. But a sack of coal holds roughly twice the energy of the same weight of wood. Over 2 centuries, coal replaced wood in Britain. One energy historian calls it the most momentous shift in the whole history of energy. Then coal learned a trick nothing else could do: boil water, make steam, push a piston. The steam engine turned heat into motion. Suddenly, power wasn't chained to a river. A factory could stand anywhere a wagon of coal could reach. Cities exploded around it. Coal-fired steam pulled trains, drove ships, and ran the mills. By 1885, coal had overtaken wood as America's largest energy source. But coal's greatest product arrived in 1882 on Pearl Street in Manhattan, Thomas Edison's first commercial power station. Coal burned in a basement, and blocks away, lamps glowed with no flame in the room. Energy had become invisible, delivered by wire. Electricity would eventually carry every other source into your home. Whoever made it cheapest and steadiest would own the modern world. Notice the pattern so far. Wood lost to coal on price and density. Muscle lost to steam on cost per unit of work. But while coal conquered the factory, the fight for light was being lost by an animal, the largest one on Earth. Whale oil burned bright and clean, and by the 1850s America's whaling fleet was hunting the oceans nearly empty to feed its lamps. Then in 1859, in Pennsylvania, Edwin Drake drilled 69 feet down and struck petroleum. Kerosene refined from it undercut whale oil. Nobody held a meeting to save the whales. Lamp by lamp, families switched to the cheaper fuel. The whale fishery collapsed on price alone. Oil then found its true partner, the internal combustion engine. Compact, liquid, absurdly energy-dense, a fuel you could pour. In 1900, American cities ran on horses, millions of them, and experts genuinely feared streets drowning in manure. Around 1920, America's horse and mule population peaked near 26 million. Then, the engine took over, and the count fell off a cliff. A truck didn't eat when it wasn't working. It didn't sleep, sicken, or age out. Cost per mile decided it, coldly, everywhere at once. Meanwhile, natural gas, which Chinese salt makers had piped through bamboo over 2,000 years ago, grew into coal's cleaner-burning rival. By the mid-20th century, the lineup looked permanent. Coal for power, oil for movement, gas for heat. Case closed. Except physicists had just found energy that made everything before it look like kindling, locked inside the atom. In the 1950s, the first nuclear plants sent power to the grid. 1 kilogram of uranium fuel outperforms tons upon tons of coal. Nuclear ran day and night, in any weather, no smoke. But the plants were staggeringly expensive to build, and accidents froze expansion for decades. And in 1956, a stranger technology went on sale: solar cells, at $1,825 per single watt. At that price, powering one house would cost millions. Solar was a toy for satellites, where cost was no object at all. But solar panels follow a strange law. Every time the world doubles the number produced, the price falls about 20%. Forever, so far. 1 watt cost $76 in 1977, $10 in the late 80s, and under 50 cents. Today, official forecasts kept losing to reality. One agency's 2020 solar projection was reached 8 years ahead of schedule. In 2020, the International Energy Agency called solar, in the right conditions, the cheapest electricity in history. Cheaper than anything, ever. And those windmills that vanished? They returned as turbines 30 stories tall. Wind and solar now supply about 15% of the world's electricity. So, here's the puzzle. If solar is the cheapest electricity in history, why has coal stayed the world's largest source for over 50 years? Because cheap isn't enough. The sun sets. The wind stops. Coal, gas, and nuclear answer the question every grid asks. What about tonight? That's the rule hiding inside every transition in this story. The winner is whatever delivers the most reliable energy at the lowest cost. Wood, water, whales, horses, none were banned or beaten by ideas. Each was simply outcompeted on cost, reliability, or both. Which is why the current fight runs through batteries. Their cost has fallen almost 90% since 2010. Cheapness, buying reliability, and demand is about to surge. Electricity for data centers is projected to more than double between 2024 and 2030. The next energy king won't be chosen by speeches or slogans. It will be chosen the way every king before it was, on the bill. Next time, the electricity in your wall and why the world could never agree on how it should arrive. That story starts with a plug.